It's Hearthstone Grandmasters for the European region, and we are in our final week before we head out to the Masters Tour in Las Vegas. And this week, I'm Matt Cyberbull, joined by Gallon. And Gallon has been providing us with some fantastic insight as I'm about to hiccup as I keep going through this. So Gallon, please pick it up. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. I think today we have a ton of rematches. Up first, we have Pavel versus Seiko. I'll be excited to see how that does. I think Seiko won Seiko won match 1. Match 2?
Match 1, he won the first one. I have hiccups. This is like a really bad timing to get hiccups.
It's okay. I think I'm messing up a little bit too here.
It's right when you go to a live broadcast, like all of a sudden I get hit with this. Come on, body, pull it together. What are you doing? Let's go ahead and take a look at standings or schedule. I'm not sure exactly which one we're headed to because I've been totally thrown off by this bodily function that I'm having right here. So today's schedule, take a look there. Every single match today is a rematch of what's happened. That's right. We've hit the halfway point, and that means everyone is now in double jeopardy.
I'm looking at the game 1, Pavel versus Seiko. I think Seiko is just going to easily take it like he did last time. It's going to be a mage mirror, but Seiko has proven himself as a great mage player. Pavel has been very shaky, I would say.
Why is that?
I mean, look at their deck list, first of all. Well, we can't look at them right now, but Seiko has a big game hunter in his primary list. Pavel is a mage deck. Big Game Hunter kills a sea giant. It kills a mountain giant. They die, and then Pavel dies very quickly afterward.
We'll have to see how it goes. It's a mirror match day, which is very thematic as we take a look at the standings as well, that all of the matches that are taking place from now on are second matches that the players will have to be playing. They play through everyone in their division, and then your goal after 14 matches into Grandmasters, you can see it there, be in that top 3 spot where you advance to that playoff marker. And so far, Fino and Seiko have set themselves miles above the rest of the field.
Seiko has lost only 2 games so far in the entire Grandmaster League. Those were 2 days ago, I believe.
Yes, and honestly, I think if I just break it down purely on a technical play level, that Seiko to me is the standout for the player that I think has played the best. And now, I think it's very close. I think a lot of players have been playing pretty lights out. I think we have seen some spots where the mistakes that players make look more highlighted simply by comparison of the field that they're playing in. You know, I compare the play in Grandmasters to something I've seen like in playoffs over the last few years, and I think the play is typically a cut above. However, when you are seeing so many fewer mistakes and you're seeing so many strong lines and iterations from players, the minor mistakes that they're making tend to oftentimes be a game-deciding mistake. And so to me, it stands out a lot more, and I think Seiko has just been making fewer of those than anybody so far.
I think this weekend we've seen a lot of questionable plays that end up deciding games. Seiko versus Orange, Seiko did end up losing, but I don't think he did anything wrong. If anything, it was the deck list that he'd submitted just did not line up versus what Orange brought.
All right, well, take a look at the deck list. We're spotlighting today some of the new card interactions that are in play this week, as we had Rise of the Mechs and a balance patch, unprecedented buffs that came in. We actually only saw 2 cards from the change be affected in that. One of them was Snip Snap, which was introduced to the game. And the other one here is, as you can see in Casey's deck, it's Pogo Hopper, as it was moved from 2 mana to 1 mana. And honestly, this deck has looked quite good.
I think Snip Snap is just very good. We've been saying that a lot. That's because it is very, very good. If you were not running Snip Snap in one of your decks, you probably want to reanalyze that.
Yeah, and you know, kind of just looking at this list in general, Casey's using Snip Snap and he's using Pogo Hopper. I feel like Snip Snap right now is just a very solid card. I think it can find its way into a lot of deck lists. But I think in this deck list in particular, it has quite a home with it, where Pogo Hoppers, as they grow in size, can already be threatening, and the deck is lacking burst damage, where it needs to be able to fight for board with a card like with Snip Snap. And so using, you know, Backstab and using Sap and Shiv to try to supplement that board presence, a card like Snip Snap offers you the potential to fight for board, and it can give you a burst damage potential. And I think that is like the perfect kind of card for a deck of this style.
I'm going to say something a little bit weird. I think it's very similar to Druid's Choose One cards, like branching paths.
Oh, yeah.
You have a lot of options. You can put it on your own mechs. You can make it as just its standalone minion. And then it's also modular. The Echo effect lets you just do a ton of different things, right? You could make 2 Snip Snaps. You can make 1 Savannah High main-ish Snip Snap. On 9 mana, you have the same thing, but just even more options.
Just a very flexible card.
I think it's very flexible. I think it's very good, and it's also very skill testing.
All right, Gallon, before we hit to a break and get in our first match, I'm going to hit you with something you did not expect. I want one of your hot takes for today, something that's going to happen. You have to take a stand on it. You have to make a proclamation it will happen, and I'm going to do the same.
Silvername's going to lose. That's not a hot take.
Wow, that's a big shot fired there. He's the only token druid player in the field today. You know what? Here's my hot take. Silvername's going to win. And I don't think it's Silvername. I think it's the list he's been bringing. He's brought Mech Hunter. He's bringing Token Druid this week. I think the list that he's brought have left something to be desired. But I think here today, the Token Druid's going to get it done. I was inspired yesterday by Frozen's performance.
Frozen is Frozen, and Silvername is Silvername, and I'll just leave it at that.
All right. Well, that's Gallen's hot take of the day and my hot take of the day as well. We'll have to get to a quick break, and when we come back, Seiko and Pavel are getting underway. For Pavel, he has to start picking up wins, or his playoff hopes are going to end up slipping away. For Seiko, looking to build on the 6-1 lead he already has. Stay tuned. Hearthstone Grandmasters for Europe is coming up.
Welcome to Hearthstone Masters. Today, we're going to share one of the biggest changes coming to Hearthstone in 2019, an entirely new competitive format called Specialist. Specialist will be the default competitive format for Hearthstone Masters. From online Masters qualifiers to live Masters Tour events to the pinnacle of competition, Hearthstone Grandmasters. Ready to learn how the new Specialist format works? Let's dive right in. In this new competitive format, players select 3 30-card decks to bring to a Specialist tournament. The catch? All decks must be from the same class. In this regard, Specialist is a major departure from most other competitive formats. Amongst every player's 3 Specialist decks, one is designated as the primary deck. The player's other 2 decks are designated as secondary and tertiary decks. There are no special limitations placed on a player's primary deck aside from regular Hearthstone deck construction rules. However, a player's secondary and tertiary decks must share at least 25 cards in common with their primary deck. In other words, secondary and tertiary decks must mirror the primary deck with up to 5 cards swapped out. It is important to point out that duplicate cards count when comparing to a primary deck. For example, if you want to include 2 copies of Twilight Drake in your secondary deck, and there are no copies of Twilight Drake in your primary deck, then you must spend 2 swaps to include both cards. Unique or not, if a card isn't in your primary deck, it counts towards the 5-card difference limit. A player's primary deck is important for another reason. Whenever a new match starts, both its players must begin by piloting their primary deck. Only after the first game concludes can you choose to swap into your secondary or tertiary deck. You do not announce which of your decks you will be using in the next game, and you do not have to swap. After every game, this process repeats, allowing players to swap or stay until the match concludes. Importantly, you can swap to any of your decks between games, primary, secondary, or tertiary, including returning to your primary deck if you have previously swapped out of it. And those are all the rules for Specialist, Hearthstone's new official competitive format. So what are you waiting for? Get out there and start brewing your own primary, secondary, and tertiary decks to get a jump start on the new format and innovate like the pros.
Let the battle begin!
Seiko, Pavel, rematch, Hearthstone, Grandmasters, Europe. I don't know why I have this cadence, but Gallen, talk to me about this match that's coming up. We have a Mage Mirror match, and you and I took a particular choice in criticizing Seiko's bring this week because he just simply missed the mark. His opponents were not bringing exactly what he expected, but now in the second match, I think he has a chance for redemption on that as he's brought a big Game Hunter in the main deck of his Cyclone Mage, which is a card I think that has been criticized across the board in terms of using it as counterplay for Cyclone Mage. Talk to me about what it's doing in this main deck.
Yeah, versus Orange, I think that the Big Game Hunter just was not a correct choice, but against Pavel, it's looking quite good. Remember that Big Game Hunter is a card that you want when your opponent's only good game plan in the matchup is to develop an 8/8 and then Conjurer's calling it.
So I'm thinking the idea behind this is snag some tempo. When Pavel tries to claw it back, you have a way to generate tempo and offset Pavel's as well.
Yes, and I'm not going to say anything about this, but Seiko is 6-1 and Pavel is 2-5 right now.
And what do you think that's because of deck choice? I mean, that's largely what I boil it down to for Pavel. I think he actually brought a wise choice this week in bringing just a stronger deck. I think in the previous weeks, for me, his deck choices have left something to be desired.
I agree with that, but I think that preparation matters a lot when you're playing Cyclone Mage. Seiko's results show to me that he's probably prepared a lot more.
Now, it's funny you say that because Viper on Twitter yesterday, his hot take as that's going to be another sub-theme that I start today, was that Cyclone Mage was fairly easy to play and to mulligan with. And frankly, I disagree with his opinion, but I'm not Viper. And that to me is the perspective that I had is I'm like, well, it might be easy for someone like Viper. Viper's one of the best players in the world. What about this deck strikes you as easy or intuitive to play?
I think that its strong cards are very easy to understand. You want to play a Mountain Giant with a lot of cards in hand, and then Conjurer's calling it. You're going to win a lot of games that way. However, there is a slightly weaker strategy with the Cyclone Mage. I'm only saying slightly weaker. It's still very powerful, but it's going to require a lot of thought about how you portion your resources over the course of the turn. You're going to have to play very quickly because you're playing like 6 spells at once, and then you're playing a Cyclone, and then there's 6 more spells that you got to deal with, and then you got to think about your hand size, and then
There's a lot of things that go into it. And so for me, I'm just going to give what ends up going through my head every single time I play this deck when I don't have just simply Mountain Giant unchecked and then Conjurer's Calling, whether I combo them together in the same turn or just, the game pans out that way. When does my Sorcerer's Apprentice want to come down? So that way when my opponent needs to take care of it, it means that I'm offsetting an important play that they would otherwise make. With the cards in my hand, how many of them do I need to save versus expend on the turn I'm going to play Sorcerer's Apprentice and I'm going for a Mana Cyclone turn to fill up my hand? Number 3 is about the timing of the spells that are there. There's a lot of random occurrences. Which ones are most likely to help me? There's a lot of redundancy in Mage as well. So what types of spells do I need? Is this the kind of situation where I need to go for it? Do I need to be desperate? Can I hold for a Mountain Giant and get a better scenario? Should I play for defense right now? Can I get an offensive pressure? There's so many factors that happen at the start of a turn with so many hands that I think easy is a grand understatement of what this deck is.
I mean, a lot of Hearthstone, as we've been saying this entire broadcast, is that keeping it simple is important. Cyclone is a card that will not keep it simple for you.
Yeah, and we're not talking just for the sake of talking. I've gotten word that Pavel has stepped away from the computer to take a quick bathroom break, and so I'm going to call back to his life coach match where he had punted away the game for the World Championships. Life coach reacts very drastically to the scenario, and years down the road when we asked Pavel what happened in that match, he said, I really had to go to the bathroom. So take your time, Pavel. I want to see you play good as well, because I know he's got it in him. But his record, honestly, I think has been reflective of some of the attitude I've seen from him on Twitter, where I think he is taking it a bit more casually than he's used to. And that seems to me like not an uncommon occurrence, but not a common one either, because we've only had so many players like hit the actual peak of their Hearthstone play. But I feel like once you've hit the very top of it, it's really hard to push to get that same thing. There's just so much effort that goes behind it.
Asking the world champion to try harder is kind of funny, I would say.
It seems like yes, but also no at the same time.
I mean, yes, we are competing in a new year. Pavel is no longer the world champion. Hunter Ace took it from him. Maybe he wants the title back.
Well, Tom took it from him. And then,
oh, yes, Tom and then Hunter Ace.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I shortcutted it a little bit there.
But, I look at Asia Pacific, and Tom, I feel like, is playing well, not necessarily to his fullest potential. But again, it's that same thing. It's like, they're very good. And I know that Pavel's good. I've spoken so much with Pavel about the game. I've seen him play. He's talked a lot about how he tries to take advantage of players, how he tries to approach a tournament to capitalize on people's mistakes. He's got a very good mind for the game, and he has an interesting approach that I think a lot of players don't take, where a lot of players focus on not being exploitable themselves, where a lot of times I think Pavel has actively put himself at risk of being exploited for the sake of trying to do that to other players.
I mean, I honestly think it just comes down to how much they prepare. You can be a very smart player in Hearthstone. There are a lot of very smart players in Hearthstone. I've talked with a lot of people, and a lot of them are very smart. What I can say is that you can't go into a new meta without preparing. If you don't play games, you will not understand what is good and what is bad. You can be as smart as you want. If you don't know what's going on, you're going to lose. I think that if Pavel prepared more, he'd be at a much better record than he is right now at 2-5.
It's hard for me to speak to his preparation because I don't know his regiment, but something tells me you're on the right track.
I'm going to say 2 Vex Crow as a rebuttal to that.
Well, as we're in Specialist here, we are submitting a unique deck for the first game, which must be queued up, and then you have to bring 2 other decks of the same class. They can be up to 5 cards different, and you can queue up any of the 3 decks in games 2 and 3, and your goal is to win a best-of-3 series that way. One of Pavel's side deck, he chooses to only substitute 2 cards for 2 copies of Vex Crow. It's very unusual, but this has been sort of a standard for Pavel, is to underutilize a secondary or tertiary deck.
I believe week 1 we saw him sub out 3 total cards among his 2 lineups.
It was one deck substitute out 3 cards, the other deck substitute out 2 cards,
okay.
And both of them kind of seemed like the same thing. but just for slightly different purposes. In week 1, honestly, Pavel just took a big risk, and I see why he took the risk. I think his game preparation could have been better, but the idea to me behind it was he thought everyone was going to bring Rogue, and so he tried to beat Rogue, and that did not pan out how he thought.
He got bombed in the face.
Yeah. And here, Seiko, he's popping off on this turn. I feel like this is one of the setups where Cyclone Mage does feel a bit easier to me. I play a minion, it goes unchecked. I play another minion, it goes unchecked, and then I have a Cyclone to go with it, and not really much else action going on.
What I find interesting is that he's not played his Mirror Images. It let him get another spell from his Mana Cyclone, but then that means his board is full. If Pavel did not clear any minions, Seiko could not play this Mountain Giant in his hand, which is something that he really wants to do.
It also would open Pavel into playing his own Sea Giant.
That's quite right. With 7 minions, he could play a 3-mana Sea Giant. He still does not have the mana for a Coin Conjurer's Calling, though, I believe. He only has 5 available to him.
And I guess staring down Dark Frog is kind of where the thinking on that is. Like, your opponent has a bunch of minions out, they can play their own Sea Giant then, and then kill off your Sea Giant.
Makes a lot of sense.
But the board space is the primary decision for Seiko there. So now Pavel, kind of a wonky-looking hand. I'm feeling like Mountain Giant is risky at best. And kind of my thought here, again, is the same thing with the Sea Giant. It just can get cleared off very easily.
I mean, the problem with playing your Mountain Giant right now is that it's your only big thing in your hand. You want to use this Conjurer's Calling the matchup a lot. And if we use our Mountain Giant right now, we have no Conjurer's Calling targets. I wouldn't even be surprised to see a Sand Miner this turn, just because it gives us an immediate Mountain Giant into Mountain Giant Coin Conjurer's Calling next turn. This is
Pavel protecting the Giant with Mirror Image. So sort of the way I look at this is I like how Seiko set this up where he knew that Pavel's likely response to this is just board tension. With Sea Giant in hand, let that happen.
Makes a lot of sense. Ooh, that is a...
I mean, this is a Sea Giant Conjurer's Calling turn here for Seiko if he wants it.
We could also go Mountain Giant, Sea Giant. Sea Giant Conjurer's Calling.
Yeah. You could... In that case, you could Astral Rift, Mountain Giant, Sea Giant. It just keeps going, man. The iterations, they keep going. There's always something else you can do, it feels like. That's going to be 2 big things.
I imagine that's what he's going for.
And Seiko's already got the Mirror Image down, so Pavel responding this, I feel like he may have just gotten pushed out of the game, just brute force.
One thing that I really want to talk about in this matchup that comes up quite a bit is that if you Conjurer's Calling a Mountain Giant into Grave Horror, it is a 7-attack minion. That means that when another Giant hits that Grave Horror, it is going to be an 8-attack, 1-health minion. It's still alive. Conjurer's Calling can turn that into 2 8-attack, 8-health minions.
Yeah, I feel like in this matchup, oftentimes, when you take the lead, that Conjurer's Calling on Sea Giant is superior, and that when you're behind, because Mulch Muncher is no longer a viable pull from the Conjurer's Calling on Sea Giant, that you have to try to go for Grave Harbor and just hope that it holds.
Another thing I want to talk about in this matchup that's related to what you're talking about is Frost Nova and the usage of it.
Interesting.
Generally, the person that has the Frost Nova first, especially if they're playing defensively, is going to lose.
Yeah, it's a major detriment.
We're looking at Pavel's hand right now. This is looking like a Frost Nova turn. Otherwise, he's taking, what, 16, 19, 24 damage, and then he just dies to a ping?
Right, so my question is, how do you actually fight back? Does Frost Nova fight back in this instance? I don't think it does.
I honestly agree with you.
It might now, because he's got 2 big things in play. So now he has viability of being able to go through it. But honestly, I think this play is better. I think that just going for board pressure is going to be superior. Because if Seiko has Conjurer's Calling here, I think Pavel's just going to lose.
Yep.
For the exact reason you just explained. First, Frost Nova, all that's going to do is maintain board parity. He has to try and break it.
No, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, Seiko pretty much has this game locked down at this point. He has 2 Giants that are going to become 4 Giants. Or the equivalent with 10 mana cards. Can he even kill both of these?
Yeah, he's free to kill the Giant as well, because he's got 6 attack on board. He's going to use Conjurer's Calling twice. Magic Dart Frog deals the damage. You sweep it up with the Sorcerer's Apprentice and the Dart Frog.
Pavel does not have a Frost Nova Doomsayer in his deck.
Nope. He does have a Conjurer's Calling, though, but there's not going to be any 2-drops, I imagine, after this turn.
Yep, Seiko is probably considering that. Even a Summoner spell up.
Yeah, this is just... This was a game.
Of Hearthstone.
This was a game that did look easy. And now, Seiko does technically leave himself vulnerable, but he saw a Conjurer's Calling from Pavel, so Pavel would have to have a spell and a Conjurer's Calling and hit Doomsayer from the Conjurer's Calling on the Dart Frog.
You wonder about that. You wonder if trading off the Dart Frog was just correct to avoid that. Well, I mean,
so narrow.
he has to have a spell plus Conjurer's Calling, right?
Plus hit the Doomsayer.
Yes.
That's like unbelievably unreasonable.
I agree with you. Well, it's not unreasonable, right? Because it's still a very small percentage. I would say that if there's no 2-drops in play right there, Seiko 100% wins that game every single time.
That's what I mean in the early show where I was talking about you have to get super nitpicky to find real mistakes in the players.
It's less than 100%.
Yeah, I mean, Pavel just got blown out in that situation. And honestly, a lot of the Mage mirror matches do feel that way to me. It's extremely volatile, and it's when both players fail to draw an ideal situation is when the game gets interesting. When it turns into a strange tempo battle where too much on board or too little on board are both deficits, and you also have to balance the responsive pressure that you have.
That is not what happened in that game.
No, not at all.
Seiko had the nuts. He got a huge Mana Cyclone with a bunch of minions in play. That means Sea Giant was cheap, and his Mountain Giant was cheap. He had both of them, and he had a Conjurer's Calling.
Like, when you get ideal hands, capitalize. And that's what we've seen Seiko do the entire time that he's had an ideal hand, is capitalize and close the game very quickly. He does not leave breathing room for you to recover on that. And I think, honestly, that's an important facet for winning Hearthstone games. In fact, I think it's one of the things I struggle with most is when I get ahead in a game, I tend to get a little bit more lazy about it. And then I look down a couple turns later and I go, wait, how did I lose?
You know, I agree with you. We've been talking about this from the opposite side, is that really good players try to find any way to stay in the game. Like, they want to leave up avenues for them to possibly win. On the flip side, when they're winning, they want to close off as many avenues as possible. I think the Seiko did a very good job at that.
Indeed. And so both players are going to stick on their primary decks. I think their secondary and tertiary do not have cards that are just meant for the mirror matches at all. And that's exactly what I'm seeing. Both Seiko's deck would remove Big Game Hunter and Sea Giant. Don't want that. And Pavel's decks do not add anything of relevance to the matchup. So primary is what they're sticking on for game number 2 and possibly game number 3. I'm going to take that moment actually to talk about a game I played last night. I actually queued into Fibonacci last night, and we were playing a Warrior Mirror match, and I had Dr. Boom Mad Genius, and he did not. And I lost. And I lost to a couple of tech cards that were unexpected. He had some magnetic things in a Warrior deck that were really put me in some bad spots. But mostly it was about tempo pressure. I got ahead, and I got lazy. And then I lost sight of what was going to win me the game, and I got tempoed out. And I was like, wow, this isn't supposed to happen. I'm the one with rush minions in this scenario. But I lost sight of what was important, which was being able to contain board pressure so that my opponent could not launch an assault on me. I had such inevitability in the spot I was in. And I feel like for Seiko, the only parallel I can draw between that experience I had in there was playing around Pavel, having a second spell to get rid of the counter spell, and then the second Conjurer's Calling to hit his own 2-drop and roll a Doomsayer from it, which is an extremely low probability.
It's still a probability, though.
But that's what I mean. That's the play we're seeing in Grandmasters. You have to get nitpicky, or you're never going to ever see anything that goes wrong.
You could have played 0.01% better.
Yeah. Scrub.
You remember Freeze Mage? I always felt like Freeze Mage. The old Freeze Mage players were always like that, laughing, known for his Freeze Mage play. George C. They would go through a 30-turn game, and there'd be one thing that would be slightly incorrect. It'd be, this guy is a terrible Freeze Mage player.
Hyperbole is a powerful tool.
Especially in Hearthstone. I mean,
you know, I feel like it's actually most commonly, of all the games that I've played throughout my whole life, I feel like hyperbole is such a strongly used facet of language in Hearthstone. Like when people say, oh, you don't lose that matchup. What they really mean is like, you're like 55-45 favored.
There's a running meme right now, I would say, in the pro Hearthstone community among medium-ish to bad-ish cards where people say, you always run this. You always run Banana Buffoon.
Well, I think Banana Buffoon's great in this deck.
You never play Wrench Caliber.
In that spot, you mean? Not in the deck list, in the particular
Some people
spot
are saying that in the deck list.
Whoa!
Well, here's the thing. They don't actually mean you never do it.
Well, I definitely don't mean never. Wrench Caliber's like 16 damage for 4 mana.
They always draw the bombs.
Hyperbole is a powerful language. It's very present in Hearthstone. And so as we see the difference in both games now as well, I think one of the major differences that we're seeing is that Seiko has early pressure.
I mean, you're looking at this Mountain Giant, but he also has Khadgar, Coin Conjurer's Calling on a 3-drop.
Perhaps.
Now, he's probably playing a Mountain Giant,
Well,
but he also could make a full board.
So Darok and I actually talked to Orange specifically about this matchup a couple weeks back, and he warned us that he might make some unusual looking plays, but that in practice he had found them oftentimes to be quite superior, which was getting aggressive Conjurer's Calling and using it on 3-cost minions. That oftentimes, because Mage does not answer just efficient minions very well, that you'll end up doing that. Now, Seiko has Mountain Giant, and Pavel can't answer it in his main or side deck straight up. There's no snap freezes, as were teched in the earlier weeks. And there's nothing in his side decks that offer him relief from the situation. For Seiko, this is easy to get away from any aggression and just play your cards straight forward. I think that that's one of the big issues with not running tech cards in a Mage deck, is your opponent is free to make these options every single time. If Pavel wants to do the same, he has to think about Big Game Hunter.
That's very fair. While we were talking about this, we kind of glossed over his last turn. I found it very weird. He could have gone Elemental Invocation for a Mana Giant, or a Mountain Giant. Seiko does have a Magic Dart Frog in play, and Pavel knows about the bananas, so he would know that his Giant gets cleared. However, Seiko would have to use a lot of his resources to do that, which means that his avenue of just instantly winning the game, which is dropping his own Mountain Giant, would not only be delayed, but it likely wouldn't be able to be played the following turn as well.
So what's he thinking about in that regard then? Is he trying to find a Sorcerer's Apprentice to maybe combo with some stuff and freeze out the board to prevent that?
I think that he's thinking Seiko just doesn't have a Giant. But Seiko had the Giant.
And now what?
Interesting.
Did he
Now
not
he
account
loses.
for that?
Well, now he has to think, oh, Seiko doesn't have a Conjurer's Calling, but Seiko has a Conjurer's Calling. Ray of Frost does not say kill a Giant.
Oh my.
That's a dead Pavel.
This is not good for Pavel.
He can kill the 8/8. He can summon 4 8/8s of his own. Pavel has Frost Nova exactly to stay alive for one more turn. He's looking at Mana Cyclone into about 4 extra Frost Novas as his avenue to win this game.
Do you think a Giant last turn would have changed this at all?
I think that it would have changed it quite a bit.
I mean, would we just be seeing a repeat of this down the road? Like what?
Down the road is the important part.
Okay.
Pavel can draw cards as the game progresses.
So you're not going to take a stand on whether or not Pavel significantly increases the edge by creating that tension and forcing Seiko to respond, but rather he should have done this because that was his only hope in the face of one of Seiko's prime plays.
I mean, we're looking at a pretty bird's eye view of the game. I think that hoping your opponent doesn't have Mountain Giant can be an okay strategy.
Do you think it was okay in this spot?
No, I don't think so.
Wow. Well.
Because, I mean...
All right, wait, hang on. There is a way back. There is a way back.
It's Conjurer's Calling for a Doomsayer.
No, it's Mana Cyclone. So you get to kill off Sorcerer's Apprentice here. You get to kill off Khadgar here. I guess do you want to kill off Khadgar here? I think he needs the freezes. You just have to have this Mana Cyclone produce the nuts.
Yep.
I'm thinking multiple Blizzards.
Yeah, Frost
Kona
Novas and
Colds.
Blizzards. That's
Frost
what I'm
Novas.
talking about. I don't even think Kona Cold really does it.
You can Astral Rift for a Doomsayer. Pavel's got his work cut out for him.
I'm trying to think of what Astral Rift can pull. Is there
Minions.
a 5-mana card that kills 4 7/8s, a Khadgar, and a Magic Dart Frog? Because if there is, I kind of want to run that in all of my decks.
Brawl.
Astral Rift into Brawl.
Well, you just asked me 5-mana card.
I know Blizzard's a small indie company, but I don't think Astral Rift is pulling Brawl anytime soon.
Well, you said card, not minion. You just asked a question. It was just a generic trivia question. Oh. So we're missing a way to freeze out boards in Pavel's perspective. So I think that's going to put him on the track to getting closed out here. But what are some more possibilities? So I'm thinking Sea Giant, Conjurer's Calling. What 10 drops really produce in that spot?
Interesting.
I'm thinking of the only thing that actually deals damage to Seiko is Card the Soul Flayer.
Let's think about fighting for board. Like, what fights for board best in that situation? You know, Deathwing's a 12/12, pretty sizable.
That's good.
You have a lot of block in the way right now for just damage on board. Like, you can maybe sustain against 2 blows. is what I'm thinking with Pavel's board. So it's like
Interesting.
Big Bad Archmage for value, perhaps something that he can get. Summons a random 6-drop at the end.
Safeguards off of Big Man Archmage.
Ah.
Save him.
So I think there's some fringe scenarios here where Pavel, if for Pavel to figure out the best one of those, I don't think he's got the time to do that because that's a lot of calculations. But he has a chance, I think.
One thing that really hurts Pavel's chances here is the recent buff patch, which is actually a stealth nerf to Cyclone Mage. Mulch Muncher used to cost 10 mana, which means that you could Conjurer's Calling into a Mulch Muncher.
Okay.
Kill a 7/8.
We have a Big Bad Archmage in line. We just don't have board space right now. So Pavel needs to find Freeze, and he needs to find another Conjurer's Calling. So I'm thinking card draw is one of the biggest aspects that Pavel can find next turn. But he has to be fortunate for the rest of this game.
What if Seiko just kills the Big Bad Archmage?
Then you take less damage.
What happens if he still has a huge board after you take less damage?
You got to draw the right cards. The point is, I'm saying Pavel has an opportunity where, in my opinion, there just shouldn't be one based on what Seiko's done.
I think that Pavel has, if we're talking about opportunities right now, I'd say it's a 1 in 1,000 to win this game or over.
That's a lot more than what it looked like last turn. I'm taking every edge I can get right now.
Fair.
That's what you were preaching about last game.
Pavel has an out. There is a way this game progresses that Pavel wins it.
It's extremely unlikely, but you're saying there's a chance.
I see 14,607 futures, and there is exactly one where Pavel wins. Pavel, Seiko has to be considering here if he just like kills the minions and Conjurer's Calling's a big thing. What happens in the game?
He's got 3 attacks left, 2/2, 8/9, and 7/8. Why is that one the attack? Why would we use the Banana Buffoon to do that? So he wants the board space gone for Conjurer's Calling.
Yes.
That would be exactly why. And then he uses Hero Power on the Mechathune. Ah, perhaps not.
You wonder if he could have had an 8/9 instead of a 7/8 here.
I think the idea was to make sure that Mechathune could not get double bananaed and value traded to Conjurer's Calling. I think that was the mindset exactly.
But it
for
still
Seiko.
can get double bananaed into Conjurer's Calling.
Not with efficiency. So
There
if
you
Pavel
go.
has
Yep.
Sorcerer's Apprentice, Banana Buffoon, and a Freeze with Conjurer's Calling, he cannot spend that much mana. 2 mana on Sorcerer's Apprentice, 3 mana on Banana Buffoon, that leaves him with 3 left, so he can't Conjurer's Calling and Frost Nova in that same turn.
You're saying the mana expenditure at that point is just too high.
Right. It's a very fringe play around, but I think it's there. And so now, for Pavel, I'm thinking it is emergency button time.
I think we're going Conjurer's Calling on a 1/3, trying to rip a Doomsayer.
I was thinking...
No, this is way higher. Whatever you... Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
I agree yours is way higher, but I want to win the game. I don't want to reset it. I'm thinking Astral Rift, you get Sorcerer's Apprentice and Mana Cyclone. You
Oh.
play Sorcerer's Apprentice.
Mhm.
You use your Frost. You Banana Buffoon. Maybe you Banana Buffoon first, I don't know. But either way, you Mana Cyclone into Frost Nova is the gist of it at the end. None of those are even close to that, so Pavel's in on the Doomsayer. One more shot. It's not it. Pavel gets blown out of 2 games. Seiko, sick draws, and closes it out.
You wonder if there's any way... Well, it's really hard to say, right? Because you have to trade off your Khadgar as well. I'm saying if Seiko could have traded off his 2 drops to just eliminate that possibility of a Doomsayer.
I don't think he's concerned with that. I really don't. In fact, we can ask him that as well. We can ask him about percentage play in that situation, because frankly, that match was a total blowout. And the only way that I think he's losing those matches is something random spectacular happening in those situations. And so if that's the case, in my mind, I want to trade off my 2 drops. Seiko did not. In that second game, I don't think he had the liberty to. He cleared off mirror images instead with those attacks. But that is something to ask about. When should you be trading off the 2 drops? When are you that far ahead?
It's hard to say, right? Because the Khadgar was frozen constantly. Was there ever a chance for him to trade it in?
Oh, you're getting hiccups now.
Yeah. It's contagious.
Seiko's ready for an interview. Seiko, can you hear us?
Hey guys.
Hello, and congratulations on your win here. This match was pretty one-sided, I think, when the cards are face up and you see them. And so the main question that Gallon and I actually have for you is quite pedantic, I would say. When should you be trading off your 2 drops in a matchup like that to actually play around the out of an opposing Conjurer's Calling for Doomsayer?
I'm not like it's so unlikely to hit Doomsday. I don't think I wanted to trade off my Katka. And I don't think it was possible to trade all of my 2-drops, right?
I don't think it was in game number 2. I'm more referring to a general sense. Like, when are you confident enough that you're far enough ahead that you can actually play around unlikelihoods to that degree?
I think since Pavel's running Nova, I don't want to give him percentages to come back with like some giant turns. So I really dislike trading off my 2-drops.
That's pretty fair. I have to ask you about something. How did you come to the conclusion that Big Game Hunter was right in your primary?
So I expected my opponents to be Mage or Warrior. That's why I was pretty bad against Rogue this week. I even wanted to switch more cards for the Warrior matchup, so I ended up playing Twilight Drake in all my decks because of it. So I really didn't expect Orange to bring Rogue, so that hurt.
I actually have a follow-up question about that. You brought Twilight Drake in your list. That's not a card that we normally see in Cyclone Mage, but I know several people think it's actually just quite good in a lot of matchups. How do you feel about it just overall against the meta?
Yeah, it was the card which is overall fine, but I only wanted it in the Warrior matchup, so I had to include it in all my decks because I already switched 5 cards. So
Makes
I
sense.
thought it's fine to have Twilight Drake.
Oh, we all miss Azure Drake. Don't worry. I want to talk about the Rise of the Mechs patch and your preparation for it. Was there anything that you really wanted to bring that you just couldn't quite justify? This week in Europe, we only saw Snip Snap and Pogo Hopper, but what other cards are really on your radar for the upcoming Masters Tour?
Like for this week, I really wanted to play the Luna Galaxy, because I wanted to bring Freeze Mage, but it ended up not having that good matchups overall. It was pretty favored against Cyclone Mage, but that's it pretty much.
How does it fare versus Mech Hunter?
Not good.
Not good. Dang it. I don't need the list.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you for the list, but I still want the list. I'm just curious of what it is. And then I just had another question. I just literally forgot what it was. Oh, the back half now. So we're halfway through the season in Grandmasters, which means that all of your matches from this point are going to be rematches. Your week against Hunter Ace, you seemed particularly stressed about the matches because of the difficulty of your opponents. Do you think that's going to be the same the second time around, or do you feel a lot better given that you have such a strong record through Grandmasters so far?
Yeah, I think I will be worried again when I face them.
Why is that?
It's just, I don't know. I feel every time I face them, I feel like I have to prep so much to keep up with them. So it's the most stressful week.
Well, I wouldn't stress that about too much. Your record is looking fantastic, and honestly, so is your play. Seiko, congratulations on your win, and I look forward to seeing you play.
Thanks.
You're worried about playing against Hunter Ace, who is the world champion, arguably the best player in the world. Why is that? Why are you nervous? Doesn't make sense to me.
Gallon, he's 7-1. Maybe that's why he's nervous. He feels like he has an expectation to live up to. That's just pure conjecture at that point. I asked him why, and he
fair enough.
He seemed like he didn't really want to go into detail about it. You know, perhaps he's just pretending at that point. He wants to just have it be fast of it. Maybe he's just genuinely nervous. I think he is just genuinely nervous because based on the expressions he was making in that week. But I'm not seeing it, man. 7-1. Second place is 4-3 behind him.
Lin is a pretty soft-spoken guy. Lin is Seiko. But man, he's just so good. We watched that game, and even besides the 2-drops, he explained that he probably wasn't good enough. He's probably right.
Yeah, I agree.
He just dominated.
Yeah,
he knew exactly what to do.
I mean, hey, that's what conjecture was. It's like, I don't want to lose my minion. What if my opponent just has a big freeze and giant turn? Like, that's always possible. If you think about the range from your opponent, That I think it's way more likely than a Doomsayer is. Casey, meanwhile, at 4-3 right behind him. Casey's coming up in our next match. He's taking on Orange. If Casey doesn't manage to pick up a win here, Seiko's going to have a 3-match lead. Even if Casey wins, he's going to have a 2-match lead. There's 6 matches left after this week, Gallon.
Seiko has to be feeling pretty comfortable.
Whoa!
Everyone in that 2 to 5 range is in the hot seat right now.
Oh, yeah. You got to start picking it up, or it's not going to work.
You got to get those wins, man.
Got to get them. If you're not going to get them, then they're not going to get got. Our first match is in the books. We have 6 today because it's Sunday. 6 matches across all of regions. Bonus Hearthstone. That's my favorite kind of Hearthstone. Seiko takes it by a score of 2-0 over Pavel, who now drops to a 2-6 record on Pavel's side. Orange versus Casey's coming up next. 3-4 record, 4-3 respectively. They both need big wins if their playoff dreams are staying alive. Stay tuned. We got more Hearthstone coming up.